Part 4 of the Argonauts, From the Heroes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Heroes, or Greek Fairy Tales for My Children, by Charles Kingsley. Part 4 of the Argonauts, How the Argonauts Sailed to Colchis. And what happened next, my children, whether it be true or not, stands written in ancient songs, which you shall read for yourselves some day. And grand old songs they are, written in grand old rolling verse, and they call them the Songs of Orpheus, or the Orphics, to this day. And they tell how the heroes came to Aphetai, across the bay, and waited for the southwest wind, and chose themselves a captain from their crew. And how all called for Heracles, because he was the strongest and the most huge. But Heracles refused, and called for Jason, because he was the wisest of them all. So Jason was chosen captain, and Orpheus heaped a pile of wood, and slew a bull, and offered it to Hera, and called all the heroes to stand round, each man's head crowned with olive, and to strike their swords into the bull. Then he filled a golden goblet with the bull's blood, and with wheaten flour, and honey, and wine, and the bitter salt sea water, and bade the heroes taste. So each tasted the goblet, and passed it round, and vowed an awful vow. And they vowed before the sun, and the night, and the blue-haired sea who shakes the land, to stand by Jason faithfully in the adventure of the golden fleece, and whosoever shrank back, or disobeyed, or turned traitor to his vow, then justice should minister against him, and the Erinnues who track guilty men. Then Jason lighted the pile, and burnt the carcass of the bull, and they went to their ship, and sailed eastward like men who have a work to do. And the place from which they went was called Aphetai, the sailing place, from that day forth. 3,000 years and more they sailed away into the unknown eastern seas, and great nations have come and gone since then, and many a storm has swept the earth, and many a mighty armament, to which Argo would be but one small boat. English and French, Turkish and Russian have sailed those waters since, yet the fame of that small Argo lives for ever, and her name is become a proverb among men. So they sailed past the Isle of Sciathos, with the Cape of Sepius on their left, and turned to the northward toward Pelion, up the long Magnesian shore. On their right hand was the open sea, and on their left old Pelion rose, while the clouds crawled round his dark pine forests and his caps of summer snow. And their hearts yearned for the dear old mountain, as they thought of pleasant days gone by, and of the sports of their boyhood, and their hunting, and their schooling in the cave beneath the cliff. And at last Peleus spoke. "Let us land here, friends, and climb the dear old hill once more. We are going on a fearful journey. Who knows if we shall see Pelion again? Let us go up to Chiron our master, and ask his blessing ere we start. And I have a boy too with him, whom he trains as he trained me once, the son whom Thetis brought me, the silver-footed lady of the sea, whom I caught in the cave, and tamed her, though she changed her shape 7 times. For she changed as I held her into water, and to vapour, and to burning flame, and to a rock, and to a black-maned lion, and to a tall and stately tree. But I held her, and held her ever, till she took her own shape again, and led her to my father's house, and won her for my bride. And all the rulers of Olympus came to our wedding, and the heavens and the earth rejoiced together, when an immortal wedded mortal man. And now let me see my son, for it is not often I shall see him upon earth. Famous he will be, but short-lived, and die in the flower of youth." So Tiphys the helmsman steered them to the shore under the crags of Pelion, and they went up through the dark pine forests toward the Centaur's cave. And they came into the misty hall beneath the snow-crowned crag, and saw the great Centaur lying, with his huge limbs spread upon the rock, and beside him stood Achilles, the child whom no steel could wound, and played upon his harp right sweetly, while Cheiron watched and smiled. Then Cheiron leapt up and welcomed them, and kissed them every one, and set a feast before them of swine's flesh and venison and good wine, and young Achilles served them, and carried the golden goblet round. And after supper all the heroes clapped their hands, and called on Orpheus to sing. But he refused, and said, "How can I, who am the younger, sing before our ancient host?" So they called on Cheiron to sing, and Achilles brought him his harp. And he began a wondrous song, a famous story of old time, of the fight between the Centaurs and the Lapithae, which you may still see carved in stone. He sang how his brothers came to ruin by their folly, when they were mad with wine, and how they and the heroes fought, with fists and teeth and the goblets from which they drank, and how they tore up the pine trees in their fury, and hurled great crags of stone, while the mountains thundered with the battle, and the land was wasted far and wide, till the Lapithae drove them from their home in the rich Thessalian plains to the lonely glens of Pindus, leaving Cheiron all alone. And the heroes praised his song right heartily, for some of them had helped in that great fight. Then Orpheus took the lyre, and sang of Chaos, and the making of the wondrous world, and how all things sprang from Love, who could not live alone in the abyss. And as he sang, his voice rose from the cave above the crags, and through the tree tops and the glens of oak and pine, and the trees bowed their heads when they heard it, and the grey rocks cracked and rang, and the forest beasts crept near to listen, and the birds forsook their nests and hovered round. And old Cheiron claps his hands together, and beat his hoofs upon the ground, for wonder at that magic song. Then Peleus kissed his boy, and wept over him, and they went down to the ship. And Cheiron came down with them, weeping, and kissed them one by one, and blessed them, and promised to them great renown. And the heroes wept when they left him, till their great hearts could weep no more, for he was kind and just and pious, and wiser than all beasts and men. Then he went up to a cliff, and prayed for them, that they might come home safe and well, while the heroes rowed away, and watched him standing on his cliff above the sea, with his great hands raised toward heaven, and his white locks waving in the wind. And they strained their eyes to watch him to the last, for they felt that they should look on him no more. So they rowed on over the long swell of the sea, past Olympus, the seat of the Immortals, and past the wooded bays of Athos, and Samothrace, the sacred isle, and they came past Lemnos to the Hellespont, and through the narrow strait of Abydos, and so on into the Propontis, which we call Marmora now. And there they met with Cyzicus, ruling in Asia over the Dolions, who, the songs say, was the son of Aeneas, of whom you will hear many a tale some day. For Homer tells us how he fought at Troy, and Virgil how he sailed away and founded Rome, and men believed until late years that from him sprang our old British kings. Now Cyzicus, the songs say, welcomed the heroes, for his father had been one of Cheiron's scholars. So he welcomed them, and feasted them, and stored their ship with corn and wine, and cloaks and rugs, the songs say, and shirts, of which no doubt they stood in need. But at night, while they lay sleeping, came down on them terrible men, who lived with the bears in the mountains, like Titans or giants in shape, for each of them had 6 arms, and they fought with young firs and pines. But Heracles killed them all before morn with his deadly poisoned arrows. But among them, in the darkness, he slew Cyzicus, the kindly prince. Then they got to their ship and to their oars, and Typhus bade them cast off the hawsers and go to sea. But as he spoke, a whirlwind came and spun the Argo round, and twisted the hawsers together, so that no man could loose them. Then Typhus dropped the rudder from his hand, and cried, "This comes from the gods above." But Jason went forward and asked counsel of the magic bough. Then the magic bough spoke and answered, "This is because you have slain Cyzicus your friend. You must appease his soul, or you will never leave this shore." Jason went back sadly, and told the heroes what he had heard. And they leapt on shore and searched till dawn. And at dawn they found the body, all rolled in dust and blood, among the corpses of those monstrous beasts. And they wept over their kind host, and laid him on a fair bed, and heaped a huge mound over him, and offered black sheep at his tomb. And Orpheus sang a magic song to him, that his spirit might have rest. And then they held games at the tomb, after the custom of those times, and Jason gave prizes to each winner. To Anchius he gave a golden cup, for he wrestled best of all; and to Heracles a silver one, for he was the strongest of all; and to Castor, who rode best, a golden crest; and Polydeuces the boxer had a rich carpet; and to Orpheus, for his song, a sandal with golden wings. But Jason himself was the best of all the archers, and the Minitae crowned him with an olive crown. And so, the songs say, the soul of good Cyzicus was appeased, and the heroes went on their way in peace. But when Cyzicus' wife heard that he was dead, she died likewise of grief, and her tears became a fountain of clear water, which flows the whole year round. Then they rowed away, the songs say, along the Mysian shore, and past the mouth of Rhindacus, till they found a pleasant bay, sheltered by the long ridges of Arganthus, and by high walls of basalt rock. And there they ran the ship ashore upon the yellow sand, and furled the sail, and took the mast down, and lashed it in its crutch. And next they let down the ladder, and went ashore to sport and rest. And there Heracles went away into the woods, bow in hand, to hunt wild deer. And Hylas the fair boy slipped away after him, and followed him by stealth, until he lost himself among the glens, and sat down weary to rest himself by the side of a lake. And there the water nymphs came up to look at him, and loved him, and carried him down under the lake to be their playfellow, for ever happy and young. And Heracles sought for him in vain, shouting his name till all the mountains rang. But Hylas never heard him, far down under the sparkling lake. So while Heracles wandered searching for him, a fair breeze sprang up, and Heracles was nowhere to be found, and the Argo sailed away, and Heracles was left behind, and never saw the noble Phasian stream. Then the Minuai came to a doleful land, where Amycus the giant ruled, and cared nothing for the laws of Zeus, but challenged all strangers to box with him, and those whom he conquered he slew. But Polydeuces the boxer struck him a harder blow than he ever felt before, and slew him. And the Minuai went on up the Bosporus, till they came to the city of Phineus, the fierce Bithynian king, for Zetes and Calais bade Jason land there, because they had a work to do. And they went up from the shore toward the city, through forests white with snow, and Phineus came out to meet them with a lean and woeful face, and said, "Welcome, gallant heroes, to the land of bitter blasts, the land of cold and misery. Yet I will feast you as best I can." And he led them in, and set meat before them. But before they could put their hands to their mouths, down came two fearful monsters, the like of whom man never saw; for they had the faces and the hair of fair maidens, but the wings and claws of hawks, and they snatched the meat from off the table, and flew shrieking out above the roofs. Then Phineus beat his breast, and cried, "These are the Harpies, whose names are the Whirlwind and the Swift, the daughters of Wonder and of the Amber Nymph. And they rob us night and day. They carried off the daughters of Pandarius, whom all the gods had blessed, for Aphrodite fed them on Olympus with honey and milk and wine, and Hera gave them beauty and wisdom, and Athené skill in all the arts. But when they came to their wedding, the Harpies snatched them both away, and gave them to be slaves to the Erinnues, and live in horror all their days. And now they haunt me and my people in the Bosphorus with fearful storms, and sweep away our food from off our tables, so that we starve in spite of all our wealth." Then uprose Zetes and Calais, the winged sons of the North Wind, and said, "Do you not know us, Phineus, and these wings which grow upon our backs?" And Phineus hid his face in terror, but he answered not a word. "Because you have been a traitor, Phineus, the Harpies haunt you night and day. Where is Cleopatra, our sister, your wife, whom you keep in prison? And where are her 2 children, whom you blinded in your rage at the bidding of an evil woman, and cast them out upon the rocks? Swear to us that you will right our sister, and cast out that wicked woman, and then we will free you from your plague, and drive the whirlwind maidens to the south. But if not, we will put out your eyes, as you put out the eyes of your own sons." Then Phineus swore an oath to them, and drove out the wicked woman, and Jason took those 2 poor children, and cured their eyes with magic herbs. But Zetes and Calais rose up sadly, and said, "Farewell now, heroes all. Farewell, our dear companions, with whom we played on Pelion in old times. For a fate is laid upon us, and our day is come at last, in which we must hunt the whirlwinds over land and sea for ever. And if we catch them, they die, and if not, we die ourselves." At that all the heroes wept, but the 2 young men sprang up and aloft into the air after the Harpies, and the battle of the winds began. The heroes trembled in silence as they heard the shrieking of the blasts, while the palace rocked, and all the city, and great stones were torn from the crags, and the forest pines were hurled earthward, north and south and east and west, and the Bosphorus boiled white with foam, and the clouds were dashed against the cliffs. But at last the battle ended, and the Harpies fled screaming toward the south, and the sons of the North Wind rushed after them, and brought clear sunshine where they passed. For many a league they followed them, over all the isles of the Cyclades, and away to the south-west across Hellas, till they came to the Ionian Sea, and there they fell upon the Echinades at the mouth of the Achelous, and those isles were called the Whirlwind Isles for many 100 years. But what became of Zetes and Calais I know not, for the heroes never saw them again. And some say that Heracles met them, and quarrelled with them, and slew them with his arrows. And some say that they fell down from weariness and the heat of the summer sun, and that the sun god buried them among the Cyclades, in the pleasant isle of Tenos. And for many 100 years their grave was shown there, and over it a pillar, which turned to every wind. But those dark storms and whirlwinds haunt the Bosphorus until this day. But the Argonauts went eastward and out into the open sea, which we now call the Black Sea, but it was called the Euxine then. No Hellen had ever crossed it, and all feared that dreadful sea, and its rocks and shoals and fogs and bitter freezing storms. And they told strange stories of it, some false and some half true, how it stretched northward to the ends of the earth, and the sluggish putrid sea, and the everlasting night, and the regions of the dead. So the heroes trembled, for all their courage, as they came into that wild black sea, and saw it stretching out before them without a shore, as far as eye could see. And first Orpheus spoke, and warned them. "We shall come now to the wandering blue rocks. My mother warned me of them, Calliope, the immortal muse." And soon they saw the blue rocks shining like spires and castles of grey glass, while an ice-cold wind blew from them and chilled all the heroes' hearts. And as they neared they could see them heaving, as they rolled upon the long sea waves, crashing and grinding together, till the roar went up to heaven. The sea sprang up in spouts between them, and swept round them in white sheets of foam, but their heads swung nodding high in air, while the wind whistled shrill among the crags. The heroes' hearts sank within them, and they lay upon their oars in fear. But Orpheus called to Tiphys the helmsman, "Between them we must pass, so look ahead for an opening, and be brave, for Hera is with us." But Tiphys the cunning helmsman stood silent, clenching his teeth, till he saw a heron come flying mast high toward the rocks, and hover a while before them, as if looking for a passage through. Then he cried, "Hera has sent us a pilot; let us follow the cunning bird." Then the heron flapped to and fro a moment, till he saw a hidden gap, and into it he rushed like an arrow, while the heroes watched what would befall. And the blue rocks clashed together as the bird fled swiftly through, but they struck but a feather from his tail, and then rebounded apart at the shock. Then Tiphys cheered the heroes, and they shouted, and the oars bent like withes beneath their strokes, as they rushed between those toppling ice crags and the cold blue lips of death. And ere the rocks could meet again they had passed them, and were safe out in the open sea. And after that they sailed on wearily along the Asian coast, by the Black Cape, and Thynias, where the hot stream of Thymbris falls into the sea, and Sangarius, whose waters float on the Euxine, till they came to Wolf the river, and to Wolf the kindly king. And there died two brave heroes, Idmon and Tiphys the wise helmsman. One died of an evil sickness, and one a wild boar slew. So the heroes heaped a mound above them, and set upon it an oar on high, and left them there to sleep together on the far off Lycian shore. But Idas killed the boar, and avenged Tiphys, and Anchios took the rudder and was helmsman, and steered them on toward the east. And they went on past Sinope, and many a mighty river's mouth, and past many a barbarous tribe, and the cities of the Amazons, the warlike women of the east, till all night they heard the clank of anvils and the roar of furnace blasts, and the forge fires shone like sparks through the darkness in the mountain glens aloft. For they were come to the shores of the Chalybes, the smiths who never tire, but serve Ares the cruel war god, forging weapons day and night. And at day dawn they looked eastward, and midway between the sea and the sky they saw white snow peaks hanging, glittering sharp and bright above the clouds. And they knew that they were come to Caucasus, at the end of all the earth. Caucasus, the highest of all mountains, the father of the rivers of the east. On his peak lies chained the Titan, while a vulture tears his heart. And at his feet are piled dark forests round the magic Colchian land. And they rode 3 days to the eastward, while Caucasus rose higher, hour by hour, till they saw the dark stream of Phasis rushing headlong to the sea, and shining above the tree tops the golden roofs of King Aeetes, the child of the sun. Then outspoke Anchios the helmsman, "We are come to our goal at last, for there are the roofs of Aeetes, and the woods where all poisons grow. But who can tell us where among them is hid the golden fleece? Many a toil must we bear ere we find it, and bring it home to Greece." But Jason cheered the heroes, for his heart was high and bold, and he said, "I will go alone up to Aeetes, though he be the child of the sun, and win him with soft words. Better so than to go all together, and to come to blows at once." But the Minuai would not stay behind, so they rowed boldly up the stream. And a dream came to Aeetes, and filled his heart with fear. He thought he saw a shining star, which fell into his daughter's lap, and that Medea his daughter took it gladly, and carried it to the river side, and cast it in. And there the whirling river bore it down and out into the Euxine sea. Then he leapt up in fear, and bade his servants bring his chariot, that he might go down to the river side, and appease the nymphs and the heroes whose spirits haunt the bank. So he went down in his golden chariot, and his daughters by his side, Medea the fair witch maiden, and Chalciope, who had been Phrixus' wife, and behind him a crowd of servants and soldiers, for he was a rich and mighty prince. And as he drove down by the reedy river, he saw Argo sliding up beneath the bank, and many a hero in her, like immortals for beauty and for strength, as their weapons glittered round them in the level morning sunlight, through the white mist of the stream. But Jason was the noblest of all, for Hera, who loved him, gave him beauty and tallness and terrible manhood. And when they came near together and looked into each other's eyes, the heroes were awed before Aeetes, as he shone in his chariot, like his father the glorious sun. For his robes were of rich gold tissue, and the rays of his diadem flashed fire, and in his hand he bore a jewelled sceptre which glittered like the stars. And sternly he looked at them under his brows, and sternly he spoke, and loud: "Who are you, and what want you here, that you come to the shore of Cutaia? Do you take no account of my rule, nor of my people the Colchians, who serve me, who never tired yet in the battle, and know well how to face an invader?" And the heroes sat silent awhile before the face of that ancient king. But Hera the awful goddess put courage into Jason's heart, and he rose and shouted loudly in answer: "We are no pirates nor lawless men. We come not to plunder and to ravage, or carry away slaves from your land. But my uncle, the son of Poseidon, Peleus the Minuan king, he it is who has set me on a quest to bring home the golden fleece. And these too my bold comrades, they are no nameless men, for some are the sons of immortals, and some of heroes far renowned. And we too never tire in battle, and know well how to give blows and to take. Yet we wish to be guests at your table. It will be better so for both." Then Aeetes' race rushed up like a whirlwind, and his eyes flashed fire as he heard. But he crushed his anger down in his breast, and spoke mildly a cunning speech: "If you will fight for the fleece with my Colchians, then many a man must die. But do you indeed expect to win from me the fleece in fight? So few are you, that if you be worsted, I can load your ship with corpses. But if you will be ruled by me, you will find it better far to choose the best man among you, and let him fulfil the labours which I demand. Then I will give him the golden fleece for a prize, and a glory to you all." So saying, he turned his horses and drove back in silence to the town. And the Minuai sat silent with sorrow, and longed for Heracles and his strength, for there was no facing the thousands of the Colchians, and the fearful chance of war. But Chalciope, Phrixus' widow, went weeping to the town, for she remembered her Minuan husband and all the pleasures of her youth, while she watched the fair faces of his kinsmen, and their long locks of golden hair. And she whispered to Medea her sister: "Why should all these brave men die? Why does not my father give them up the fleece, that my husband's spirit may have rest?" And Medea's heart pitied the heroes, and Jason most of all, and she answered: "Our father is stern and terrible, and who can win the golden fleece?" But Chalciope said: "These men are not like our men. There is nothing which they cannot dare nor do." And Medea thought of Jason and his brave countenance, and said: "If there was one among them who knew no fear, I could show him how to win the fleece." So in the dusk of evening they went down to the river side, Chalciope and Medea the witch maiden, and Argus, Phrixus' son. And Argus the boy crept forward among the beds of reeds, till he came where the heroes were sleeping, on the thwarts of the ship beneath the bank, while Jason kept ward on shore, and leant upon his lance, full of thought. And the boy came to Jason, and said: "I am the son of Phrixus your cousin, and Chalciope my mother waits for you, to talk about the golden fleece." Then Jason went boldly with the boy, and found the two princesses standing. And when Chalciope saw him, she wept, and took his hands, and cried: "O cousin of my beloved, go home before you die." "It would be base to go home now, fair princess, and to have sailed all these seas in vain." Then both the princesses besought him, but Jason said: it is too late." "But you know not," said Medeia, "what he must do who would win the fleece. He must tame 2 brazen-footed bulls, who breathe devouring flame; and with them he must plough ere nightfall 4 acres in the field of Ares; and he must sow them with serpents' teeth, of which each tooth springs up into an armed man. Then he must fight with all those warriors, and little will it profit him to conquer them, for the fleece is guarded by a serpent more huge than any mountain pine, and over his body you must step if you would reach the golden fleece." Then Jason laughed bitterly. "Unjustly is that fleece kept here, and by an unjust and lawless king; and unjustly shall I die in my youth, for I will attempt it ere another sun be set." Then Medeia trembled and said, "No mortal man can reach that fleece, unless I guide him through; for round it beyond the river is a wall full 9 ells high, with lofty towers and buttresses, and mighty gates of threefold brass; and over the gates the wall is arched with golden battlements above; and over the gateway sits Brimo, the wild witch huntress of the woods, brandishing a pine torch in her hands, while her mad hounds howl around. No man dare meet her or look on her, but only I, her priestess, and she watches far and wide, lest any stranger should come near. No wall so high but it may be climbed at last, and no wood so thick but it may be crawled through; no serpent so wary but he may be charmed, or witch queen so fierce but spells may soothe her; and I may yet win the golden fleece, if a wise maiden help bold men." And he looked at Medeia cunningly, and held her with his glittering eye, till she blushed and trembled, and said, "Who can face the fire of the bull's breath, and fight 10,000 armed men?" "He whom you help," said Jason, flattering her, "for your fame is spread over all the earth. Are you not the queen of all enchantresses, wiser even than your sister Circe in her fairy island in the west?" "Would that I were with my sister Circe in her fairy island in the west, far away from sore temptation and thoughts which tear the heart. But if it must be so, for why should you die? I have an ointment here. I made it from the magic ice flower which sprang from Prometheus' wound, above the clouds on Colchis in the dreary fields of snow. Anoint yourself with that, and you shall have in you 7 men's strength; and anoint your shield with it, and neither fire nor sword can harm you. But what you begin you must end before sunset, for its virtue lasts only 1 day. And anoint your helmet with it before you sow the serpents' teeth; and when the sons of earth spring up, cast your helmet among their ranks, and the deadly crop of the war god's field will mow itself and perish." Then Jason fell on his knees before her, and thanked her, and kissed her hands; and she gave him the vase of ointment, and fled trembling through the reeds. And Jason told his comrades what had happened, and showed them the box of ointment; and all rejoiced but Idas, and he grew mad with envy. And at sunrise Jason went and bathed, and anointed himself from head to foot, and his shield, and his helmet, and his weapons, and bade his comrades try the spell. So they tried to bend his lance, but it stood like an iron bar; and Idas in spite hewed at it with his sword, but the blade flew to splinters in his face. Then they hurled their lances at his shield, but the spear points turned like lead; and Caeneus tried to throw him, but he never stirred a foot; and Polydeuces struck him with his fist a blow which would have killed an ox; but Jason only smiled, and the heroes danced about him with delight, and he leapt and ran and shouted in the joy of that enormous strength, till the sun rose, and it was time to go and to claim Aietes' promise. So he sent up Telamon and Aithalides to tell Aietes that he was ready for the fight; and they went up among the marble walls, and beneath the roofs of gold, and stood in Aietes' hall, while he grew pale with rage. "Fulfil your promise to us, child of the blazing sun. Give us the serpent's teeth, and let loose the fiery bulls, for we have found a champion among us who can win the golden fleece." And Aietes bit his lips, for he fancied that they had fled away by night; but he could not go back from his promise, so he gave them the serpent's teeth. Then he called for his chariot and his horses, and sent heralds through all the town, and all the people went out with him to the dreadful war god's field. And there Aietes sat upon his throne, with his warriors on each hand, thousands and tens of thousands, clothed from head to foot in steel chain mail. And the people and the women crowded to every window and bank and wall, while the Minuai stood together, a mere handful in the midst of that great host. And Chalciope was there, and Argus trembling, and Medea wrapped closely in her veil. But Aietes did not know that she was muttering cunning spells between her lips. Then Jason cried, "Fulfil your promise, and let your fiery bulls come forth." Then Aietes bade open the gates, and the magic bulls leapt out. Their brazen hoofs rang upon the ground, and their nostrils sent out sheets of flame, as they rushed with lowered heads upon Jason; but he never flinched a step. The flame of their breath swept round him, but it singed not a hair of his head; and the bulls stopped short and trembled when Medea began her spell. Then Jason sprang upon the nearest, and seized him by the horn, and up and down they wrestled, till the bull fell grovelling on his knees, for the heart of the brute died within him, and his mighty limbs were loosed, beneath the steadfast eye of that dark witch maiden, and the magic whisper of her lips. So both the bulls were tamed and yoked, and Jason bound them to the plough, and goaded them onward with his lance till he had ploughed the sacred field. And all the Minuai shouted, but Aietes bit his lips with rage, for the half of Jason's work was over, and the sun was yet high in heaven. Then he took the serpent's teeth and sowed them, and waited what would befall. But Medea looked at him and at his helmet, lest he should forget the lesson she had taught. And every furrow heaved and bubbled, and out of every clod arose a man. Out of the earth they rose by thousands, each clad from head to foot in steel, and drew their swords, and rushed on Jason, where he stood in the midst alone. Then the Minuai grew pale with fear for him, but Aietes laughed a bitter laugh. "See, if I had not warriors enough already round me, I could call them out of the bosom of the earth." But Jason snatched off his helmet, and hurled it into the thickest of the throng. And blind madness came upon them, suspicion, hate, and fear; and one cried to his fellow, "Thou didst strike me;" and another, "Thou art Jason, thou shalt die." So fury seized those earth-born phantoms, and each turned his hand against the rest, and they fought and were never weary, till they all lay dead upon the ground. Then the magic furrows opened, and the kind earth took them home into her breast, and the grass grew up all green again above them, and Jason's work was done. Then the Minuai rose and shouted, till Prometheus heard them from his crag; and Jason cried, "Lead me to the fleece this moment, before the sun goes down." But Aietes thought, "He has conquered the bulls, and sown and reaped the deadly crop. Who is this who is proof against all magic? He may kill the serpent yet." So he delayed, and sat taking counsel with his princes, till the sun went down and all was dark. Then he bade a herald cry, "Every man to his home for to night. To morrow we will meet these heroes, and speak about the golden fleece." Then he turned and looked at Medea. "This is your doing, false witch maid. You have helped these yellow-haired strangers, and brought shame upon your father and yourself." Medea shrank and trembled, and her face grew pale with fear; and Aietes knew that she was guilty, and whispered, "If they win the fleece, you die." But the Minuai marched toward their ship, growling like lions cheated of their prey; for they saw that Aietes meant to mock them, and to cheat them out of all their toil. And Oileus said, "Let us go to the grove together, and take the fleece by force." And Idas the rash cried, let us draw lots who shall go in first, for while the dragon is devouring one, the rest can slay him and carry off the fleece in peace." But Jason held them back, though he praised them, for he hoped for Medeia's help. And after a while Medeia came trembling, and wept a long while before she spoke, and at last: "My end is come, and I must die, for my father has found out that I have helped you. You he would kill if he dared, but he will not harm you, because you have been his guests. Go then, go, and remember poor Medeia when you are far away across the sea." But all the heroes cried: "If you die, we die with you, for without you we cannot win the fleece, and home we will not go without it, but fall here fighting to the last man." "You need not die," said Jason. "Flee home with us across the sea. Show us first how to win the fleece, for you can do it. Why else are you the priestess of the grove? Show us but how to win the fleece, and come with us, and you shall be my queen, and rule over the rich princes of the Minuai, in Iolcos by the sea." And all the heroes pressed round, and vowed to her that she should be their queen. Medeia wept and shuddered, and hid her face in her hands, for her heart yearned after her sisters and her playfellows, and the home where she was brought up as a child. But at last she looked up at Jason, and spoke between her sobs: "Must I leave my home and my people, to wander with strangers across the sea? The lot is cast, and I must endure it. I will show you how to win the golden fleece. Bring up your ship to the wood side, and moor her there against the bank, and let Jason come up at midnight, and one brave comrade with him, and meet me beneath the wall." Then all the heroes cried together: "I will go!" "And I!" "And I!" And Idas the rash grew mad with envy, for he longed to be foremost in all things. But Medeia calmed them, and said: "Orpheus shall go with Jason, and bring his magic harp, for I hear of him that he is the king of all minstrels, and can charm all things on earth." And Orpheus laughed for joy, and clapped his hands, because the choice had fallen on him; for in those days poets and singers were as bold warriors as the best. So at midnight they went up the bank, and found Medeia, and beside came Absyrtus her young brother, leading a yearling lamb. Then Medeia brought them to a thicket beside the war god's gate, and there she bade Jason dig a ditch, and kill the lamb, and leave it there, and strew on it magic herbs and honey from the honeycomb. Then sprang up through the earth, with the red fire flashing before her, Brimo the wild witch huntress, while her mad hounds howled around. She had one head like a horse's, and another like a ravening hound's, and another like a hissing snake's, and a sword in either hand. And she leapt into the ditch with her hounds, and they ate and drank their fill, while Jason and Orpheus trembled, and Medeia hid her eyes. And at last the witch queen vanished, and fled with her hounds into the woods, and the bars of the gates fell down, and the brazen doors flew wide, and Medeia and the heroes ran forward, and hurried through the poison wood, among the dark stems of the mighty beeches, guided by the gleam of the golden fleece, until they saw it hanging on one vast tree in the midst. And Jason would have sprung to seize it, but Medeia held him back, and pointed shuddering to the tree foot, where the mighty serpent lay, coiled in and out among the roots, with a body like a mountain pine. His coils stretched many a fathom, spangled with bronze and gold, and half of him they could see, but no more, for the rest lay in the darkness far beyond. And when he saw them coming, he lifted up his head, and watched them with his small bright eyes, and flashed his forked tongue, and roared like the fire among the woodlands, till the forest tossed and groaned. For his cries shook the trees from leaf to root, and swept over the long reaches of the river, and over Aietes' hall, and woke the sleepers in the city, till mothers clasped their children in their fear. But Medeia called gently to him, and he stretched out his long spotted neck, and licked her hand, and looked up in her face, as if to ask for food. Then she made a sign to Orpheus, and he began his magic song. And as he sung, the forest grew calm again, and the leaves on every tree hung still, and the serpent's head sank down, and his brazen coils grew limp, and his glittering eyes closed lazily, till he breathed as gently as a child, while Orpheus called to pleasant slumber, who gives peace to men and beasts and waves. Then Jason leapt forward warily, and stepped across that mighty snake, and tore the fleece from off the tree trunk, and the four rushed down the garden to the bank where the Argo lay. There was silence for a moment, while Jason held the golden fleece on high. Then he cried, 'Go now, good Argo, swift and steady, if ever you would see Pelion more.' And she went, as the heroes drove her, grim and silent all, with muffled oars, till the pine wood bent like willow in their hands, and stout Argo groaned beneath their strokes. On and on beneath the dewy darkness they fled swiftly down the swirling stream, underneath black walls and temples, and the castles of the princes of the east, past sluice mouths, and fragrant gardens, and groves of all strange fruits, past marshes where fat kine lay sleeping, and long beds of whispering reeds, till they heard the merry music of the surge upon the bar, as it tumbled in the moonlight all alone. Into the surge they rushed, and Argo leapt the breakers like a horse, for she knew the time was come to show her mettle, and win honour for the heroes and herself. Into the surge they rushed, and Argo leapt the breakers like a horse, till the heroes stopped all panting, each man upon his oar, as she slid into the still broad sea. Then Orpheus took his harp and sang a paean, till the heroes' hearts rose high again, and they rowed on stoutly and steadfastly away into the darkness of the west. End of Part 4 of the Argonauts.